You are live.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our executive board meeting here at the East Bay Regional Park District. It is November 5th, and we are starting at 12:37. And of course, today our board meeting is held in accordance with Governor Newsom's executive order, allowing for board members to participate in meetings remotely. And we are providing both live audio and video streaming. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our executive board meeting here at the East Bay Regional Park District. It is November 5th, and we are starting at 12:37. And of course, today our board meeting is held in accordance with Governor. I'm glad to know I sound official. All right, shall I continue? Is that glitch taken care of?
Yes, you may continue.
Okay.
Is that okay, Sydney?
Yeah, it was just someone has the YouTube video on in the background, I believe. So.
Oh, that's what it is.
Can someone turn that? Oh.
So someone can please turn off your YouTube video so we don't have feedback. All right, so I'll go ahead and continue. We are here remotely, thanks to Governor Newsom. We have live audio and video streaming, and members of the public can provide public comments in one of three ways, either live via Zoom, by submitting an email, or leaving a voicemail as noted on our agenda. And this information can be found on our agendas, which are posted in advance on our website and also posted outdoors in the breezeway as well. And do any committee members have any questions on the process before we start with our agenda today?
Nope, we're good.
Okay, we're good. So Secretary Feng, can you please take the roll call?
Yes, this is Becky Fang, recording secretary, taking roll. Director Corbett.
Here.
Director Rosario.
Here.
Okay, and I would like to announce staff in attendance. Robert Doyle, Dr. Anna Alvarez, Jim O'Connor, Kelly Barrington, Jeff Rasmussen, Matt Grau, Allison Picard, Eric Holmes, Catherine Dudley, Deborah Ocker, Lisa Gorgon, Becky Tuden, Ren Bates, and I believe we have Carol Victor on the line. That's it.
Thank you very much, Becky. Appreciate that. And so if there aren't any questions, we can go ahead and start with our first agenda item, which is asset management systems, major infrastructure asset inventory and pavement management program. This is an informational item that will be presented according to my agenda by Kelly Barrington and Jeff Rasmussen.
Thank you, President Corbett. I'd actually like to turn it over to Eric Holmes, Administrative Analyst in Management Services, and he will be presenting, but then Kelly and I will have a few words at the end. So thank you.
Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Glad to be here, and thank you to Jeff for turning it over. Let me share my screen here. We go. All right. Well, good afternoon. As Jeff said, I'll be presenting today on pavement and facilities. My name is Eric Holmes, Administrative Analyst 2 in Management Services. This presentation will revolve around the major infrastructure replacement and renovation, the 553 fund, and the 553 funding policy, which the board approved. That policy has four main areas. It includes developing a complete inventory of the condition of our infrastructure and assets, establishing performance standards and targets, allocating sufficient resources and funding, and finally monitoring and reporting out on the progress, which is what we are doing here today. We have our program broken down into two separate areas. The first being the pavement management program, where we use the Street Saver software system for all of our paved facilities. And using that system, we end up coming up with a pavement condition index, or a PCI. And then For all the other infrastructure, our buildings and bridges, we use the VFA software, which is creates a similar index called the Facilities Condition Index, or FCI. We'll start off with pavement today. In all, the Park District has about 17.4 million square feet of pavement. It's broken down, just under half of that is on paved multi-use trails, the other half in roads and parking lots. All this data is from the most recent study, which is a few years old now. And so in 2021, a new PCI study will be conducted to update all the data and numbers. The 553 policy the board set out to have a target of 80 for our pavement condition index, and we are currently at exactly 80. Street Saver predicts that we need approximately $3 million per year for maintaining our deferred backlog of pavement. In 2020, these were the locations that we performed pavement maintenance. Go through a few of these specific ones, but Crown Beach, Temescal, and then a lot of Measure J work in Contra Costa County, and then also the Alameda Creek Trail. First project to highlight is at Crown Beach. The final phase of the Shoreline Drive multi-use path was completed, past Park Street all the way to Broadway. You can see here the trail was completely replaced, so fresh pavement all along Shoreline Drive. Out at Deer Valley, the former Roddy Ranch golf course and the entrance and parking lot received crack fill. You can see here the contractors working filling the cracks on the aging pavement. And in the foreground, that black stretch, that's a slurry seal that was applied. So this will extend the life of the pavement for a good 5 to 10 years. And the final project to highlight along the Iron Horse Trail, the contractors worked under the direction of Maintenance and Skilled Trades Project Coordinator Michael Stengel. They did a lot of more complicated work this year in Walnut Creek from Red Gear Road to Newell Road. There was a section kind of between a sound wall and apartments. And then this particular section here in San Ramon, you can see it has brand new pavement, brand new shoulders. For measuring the condition of pavement, we kind of break it down into 4 separate categories. We generally want to be in that blue to green area. 80 is, once again, our target that was set out by the board. We'll go through by park. This list in past years, we did have a few different red parks where the condition was below 50. That's no longer the case. One of those parks, like Don Castro, used to be the worst park. It was, I think, down in maybe the 20s. All the parking lots have been repaved a few years. Also, Lake Chabot was another really bad one that received a lot of work over the last, in 2018. I'll close out with the rest of the parks here. In 2021, additional work will be occurring Coyote Hills, the entrance road, and also the pathway that is adjacent to the road, George Miller Regional Trail, and some other Measure J funded work in Contra Costa County. On the facility side now. So in the VFA system, we currently have about 1,300 individual assets. A lot of, I'd say the vast majority of these are assessed. There are some that we just kind of have them in an inventory where we haven't looked at the full condition of them. But of the 1,300, we have about 800 buildings in the system, almost 200 bridges, 150 utilities. The other category, those are going to range just areas that don't quite fit into those other areas neatly, such as like irrigation systems or a concrete breakwater at Crown Beach. We've completed 5 years of the study. Originally, we were going to do 5 years. We decided to add a 6th year of assessing with VFA, our contractor consultant. This was because as time goes on, we keep finding more assets when we go to the parks, and things keep kind of showing up along the way. So we have another 113 that we're planning to do in 2021. We were going to do them this year, but due to COVID, we delayed that. Also, at the end of last year, we conducted an additional about 30 assessments on residences that hadn't been conducted on the first go round. The facility condition index for the park district, the target is set at 72. We're currently at 67. That includes $89 million of basically deferred maintenance, or here it's called the sum of the requirements that need to be done. So that's what's causing that number to be at 67 versus the total replacement value of our assets. Give you a quick idea. Brand new maintenance building for operations at Big Break just completed this summer, has an FCI of 100. There's absolutely no deferred maintenance on this building. On the flip side, we have the Park Street restrooms at Crown Beach have an FCI of 36. Once we start getting below 50, it starts to become more cost effective to look at just replacing the structures. And that is what we're planning on doing, starting at Park Street at Crown Beach, replacing these buildings. You can see they have really rough roofs. There's some dry rot on them. So that's really what's driving that number down to 36 here. Again, our condition, much like pavement, we have it broken down into the 4 different categories. With our target being 72, we need to look for areas on how we can try to raise the 67 score up to the 72. Some of the main areas we have been working on are the roofing and exteriors, because if you have a leaky roof, it just causes a whole lot of other issues in other areas. Electrical, because there's a lot of safety issues with fire, electric shock sort of problems. And then also we're starting to now work and look at HVAC, since ventilation is such an important issue. In past presentations about our infrastructure, we really reported a lot on the assessments and what the scores are, what the numbers are. But now that we're starting to near the end of the first go round of assessments, we're starting to now be able to use the information for actually implementing a preventative maintenance program. So this year was the first year we started doing projects. Lake Chabot has kind of been the first area. You see down below, it's new electrical panels, also some lighting upgrades in the marina area. A large roofing project of replacing all the roofs in the marina area is set to start this fall. And then also we're starting to look ahead to 2021 with Lake Temescal, the beach house roof, also the Tilden Park merry-go-round as well. Here, we're looking at a few different funding scenarios over a 20-year time horizon. In the past, we had estimated the funding required for facilities, so not for pavement, but just for facilities, to be approximately $7 million per year. As time has gone on, more maintenance has kind of shown up along the way. More buildings have been added into our system. And so now you're seeing our current FCI at 67. And in order to get to an FCI of 72 at the end of our time horizon, we would need to be putting in approximately $11 million in 2020 dollars. Really, no matter the scenario here, you can see in the next couple of years, the 67 itself is expected to probably go down. And that's just a function of just a lot of additional maintenance is coming due. Roofs are aging, HVAC is aging. So we just have a lot of deferred maintenance that we're expecting to crop up, to creep in over the next few years. We'll go through the FCI by park. Unlike pavement, there are quite a few parks on here that are unfortunately underneath that 50% threshold. You can see here Lake Chabot at 31. That was one of the reasons that we decided to first focus on Lake Chabot with roofs and electrical. McLaughlin East Shore always raises an eyebrow. The only asset there right now is the Seabreeze Market. So it's more deferred maintenance than the actual value of the structures out there. And then Peralta Oaks is also a new one that's showing up in the red category. And that's a function of a lot of the systems getting close to the point where they need to be looked at or replaced. And for example, the photovoltaic system on the roof is now beyond its useful life and is no longer producing where a updated system would. Close out here. You know, a lot of the older parks tend to have lower scores, like Reinhardt Redwood, a lot of deferred maintenance.
Eric, was Oyster Bay on that list?
Oyster Bay is not on the list. It's currently wrapped into MLK.
Oh, I'm okay.
Yeah, so the reason it's with Martin Luther King is just because there's currently so few assets that the numbers just kind of get weird. So as the park gets developed, we'll probably see it get broken out individually.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. With VFA software, we also have the ability now to start mapping the data. You can look here on this particular map, the size of the dot is the replacement value of the asset, so how much it's worth to replace. And then the color is the condition. You can see really when you start getting out east, the newer parks, they tend to be pretty green. You start looking along the shoreline, a little less green. And then really when you start looking at the Oakland Hills parks, the older parks, Anthony Chabot, Reinhardt Redwood, Tilden, you really start to see a big concentration of assets that have a lot of deferred maintenance.
Eric, may I ask another quick question with that map
Sure.
up?
Yeah.
So by function of this map, the green dots, like you said, are the less deferred maintenance. They're in better shape. And
Correct.
is that because these green, for the most part, these are newer parks, or are we putting more resources out into the east part of the district, or is it a function of the fact that we have older parks over here? Why is there more green, almost all green out that way, and then more?
What we tend to see in looking at this is that they tend to be newer. So if a park, for instance, like a Big Break, you know, has a really high score, it's just a newer, it's easier to maintain. When you start getting into the older parks, you know, it just starts to become difficult to, you know, like for instance, if there's a restroom, it's an old restroom, maybe it doesn't meet ADA requirements. So then, you know, it has kind of not gotten a lot of deferred maintenance work over the year because it's going to require a bigger project to update it. And then also just in the older parks, there's just so many assets that we have that they've just kind of become more difficult over the years.
Okay, thank you so much.
And the final slide that we have with the new famous maintenance work request system, it's actually by the same software company that makes VFA. And so what's exciting is that we're able to just now start incorporating data from both of those systems. So here the dots are similar in size, but you can see the bigger ones are the more valuable and more expensive assets. And then the color is the amount of work requests. So for instance, you can see here that the Glory of the Seas building has 15 outstanding open work requests and also closed work requests since we've launched Famous. And so as time goes on, we're able to start looking at where is staff having the most issues, where are they having to put in work requests for broken, you know, pipes and, you know, various issues, and then start looking at the VFA data for deferred maintenance and start being able to kind of connect the two. That way we can start doing more deferred maintenance projects to start making them preventative. So that way there are less work requests in the long run. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Great, thank you, Eric. What a fantastic presentation. Thank you. You know, Kelly Barrington and I have been great friends and worked together for a really long time, and I think that has really strengthened the major maintenance program. And Kelly's done an amazing job of not only reorganizing his budget and then and also reorganizing his whole department, and then also remember incorporating, now bringing in Famous to integrate with our system. That him and the Mass Department are really done an outstanding job in supporting this. So I'd like to ask Kelly to come on and maybe talk about a little bit the accomplishments and what he's done so far, and maybe give us a flavor for what to look forward to moving forward in the Mass Department.
Thank you, Jeff. Kelly Barrington, Chief of Maintenance and Skilled Trades for the next few minutes anyway. Anyway, first of all, I'd like to start off by thanking the board and the General Manager's Office and the AGMs. The establishment of the 553 fund in general has been a game changer for the district. In my time here, I've seen a couple of attempts to pass or float deferred maintenance bond measures that just came short. There's always an appetite for new construction in the community and new programs and new this and that. But, this joke we have about the Friends of the Sewer lift stations is about trying to build support for taking care of what we already have. And 553's made that possible. So first of all, thanks to the board. I noticed in Eric's presentation, which was very good, the contrast and condition between our pavement and our facilities. Years ago, Stephen Garrett was successful in putting together the paving program and bring it online with very, very little money. And in the time that I've been with the maintenance department, and because of the money that's in 553, we've been able to grow that from about $250,000 to $400,000 a year in project throughput to over $3 million a year in project throughput. For 2021, if the budget goes through as requested, this program will be very close to, if not fully funded and fully functioning and on schedule, which is an amazing accomplishment for this much time, for this little time. I mean, it's 20 years, but it's still a major program. Our pavement index is better than all of the surrounding cities, municipalities. It's something to be proud of because it's a good public facing thing. On facilities, we're not quite there yet. Jeff and Eric have done a great job with VFA in building the inventories and the database information we need to tie into our CMMS or work order system, Famous, whatever you want to call it. These two systems will eventually be able to talk to each other. And as we make improvements through regular maintenance activities, through 553 major maintenance activities, through just our general trades work on these system structures and subsystems, the scores will begin to improve like they have with pavement. And it's going to be a long process too. So whatever you do, don't abandon this, stay with it. This is how we get things done in the long term. And even partial funding is better than nothing. The more we take care of up front, the longer these things last and the less capital expenditure the board will have to approve in the future. So again, the way we've started this out, we do not at this point have that integration between the two databases complete. We're not ready for that just yet. There's still some work to do on both sides of it, quite a bit of it actually. We're still building the database in Famous. It's brand new this year, and we're still working through the work order part of it. The next step is to do the modules that will help us identify routine maintenance and set those schedules. We're going to set up project pages in that start to tell us, when projects need to be done and help us with the budgeting and forecasting with that based on what we're finding out of VFA. And again, those will still integrate. It's going to take time, like I said, but we are going to get there. The district is going to get there, and it's going to be a tool that the board can use to start making decisions on a capital program that we're still developing. In the meantime, what we've done with 553 is create some base budget funded departments within the maintenance department that I oversee and my managers oversee that provides for a lot of flexibility. So any money spent out of those departments, they're broken down into major maintenance facilities, communications and underground utilities. And let's see, we have one for bridges and piers. And I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the last one, Jeff, if you can out here. But paving, thank you. So all of those programs have base budget assigned to them each year that if we use, and we try to use it all, gets used on facilities in a way that's consistent with the rules for use of those monies. In other words, if it's not for infrastructure renovation and replacement, we don't use it. will go to some other source of money. It's only qualified for those things, and we watch that money very closely and track it. But it can be used by anybody. These departments that we formed are basically set up so that if Jeff needs some money for a project, or somebody in the field needs money for a project that qualifies for those use of funds, I can approve that, or my chiefs can approve, or my managers can approve that at their level if the money's right. And what that does is it makes that money available to everyone. And we've really accelerated what's happening with our staff and public facing facilities in terms of deferred maintenance. So this is the way the program's working right now, I would say, is the bridge to get to the bigger, larger program that we've been working on for years, and we'll probably get to in the next few after all these inventories are complete and we figure out how we're gonna move this forward. I'm super encouraged to see the heat maps that Eric showed. Those are useful tools. They give you some idea of, like, Ellen, you noticed this right away, Director Corbett, you know, where the attention needs to be paid first. You know, there are other ways to look at this too. We could attack roofs, for example, in a single park and move from park to park to park and save all those building envelopes and then come back and attack it a different way. Once we have all this information and data gathered, we're going to have some options on how we're going to do that with some accurate budget forecasting. So again, we're trying to leverage the success of the paving program, create flexible spending models that help staff get where they need to be with their facilities improvement that's well tracked and auditable, and then grow these programs into models based on that paving program for future success. And it's my greatest hope that we can continue to move in this direction, and that deferred maintenance in particular, continues to receive the kind of attention and funding that it really needs. It really is about preserving our parks and our facilities in perpetuity. So thank you guys for your generosity and your support over the years for these programs.
Thank you very much, Kelly. You're very welcome. You do good things with what we send to you. So thank you. Mr. GM?
Yep.
There we go. Thank you, and really appreciate the hard work of Kelly and Jeff and Eric on this great presentation. Just would like to comment on something we need to work on, and that is that in Contra Costa County, we were able to leverage in the transportation measure a very specific set aside for trail paving. That means we're not spending our money on those improvements, then we can dedicate that pavement to in-park pavement. And that's been great. We worked very hard on Alameda County to pass the measure there with trail money in there. Unfortunately, we have not been successful so far in convincing them to prioritize maintenance over new projects. Exactly what Kelly said about everybody loves a new present under the tree, but they don't want to take care of the old ones. And it's something I think the district needs to work on. The money is there. We need to have the political will and support to get that pavement money, because we're doing so much on the transportation side in Alameda County as well as Contra Costa. But the Contra Costa side established a percentage of the money many years ago now. So that's just something, the money is there. The issue is the criteria to get it is based on new projects rather than maintenance. Cities get their percentage guaranteed of street pavement maintenance. And so we've got a challenge there, and it's something for the district to work on. The other thing is we have a lot of, some would say hysteric buildings, but we have a lot of historic buildings now. A good example for you, Director Corbett, would be Glory of the Sea. We've done a lot of work there, but it's a very old, protected historic building. And at some point, you know, it's kind of like a skin is there and nothing else. You also mentioned Seabreeze. Seabreeze is frankly an asset that is a bunch of containers put together, but very popular. Nobody wants to spend a lot of money on it. What they want to do is see something that's in the general plan for the state park to rebuild a nice, some type of concession there for food and groceries. But it's kind of a historic facility for Berkeley residents. And so it's something that's going to take a lot of money to do that. But those are two good examples. The third example is every time we buy a new piece of property that has a ranch farm on it that may be 60, 70 years old from raised 3 generations of private property owners, there is always a desire to keep that for potential park residences, but it's also an obligation that goes into Kelly's team of how do we maintain yet a new building? And that is why the board has a process to say, this is too far gone. We'd like to save it. The amount of money we'd have to spend on it to make it habitable by county and state regulations to put people in it is a lot of money. So sometimes we say, we've already got 3 houses in that park. This one should be demolished and we should spend our money on keeping the other 2 up to grade. So those are kind of the difficult decisions that Kelly has to make sometimes in ops to do that. But it's a significant issue. When you look at 800 buildings, those are not all courtyards and visitor centers. A lot of those, I believe, are the residences that we have to maintain. And so you may have some questions about that. We want to provide the housing that we need in the parks that benefit the district, but we also have to maintain those, and the standards keep getting higher. We buy a house with asbestos in it. We buy a house as part of property that's got a septic system that's failed or a well system that's failed. It has gotten more and more expensive and difficult to permit those. So I wanted the board to understand that. But thank you guys so much. Great. We've come so far.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. General Manager. You've definitely highlighted the importance of, keeping track of that deferred maintenance and not letting it get out of hand, because as we all know, the lesson that Kelly also just taught us again, it costs a lot more if you don't keep up on it. So I'm going to ask Director Rosario, if you have any questions or comments.
Thank you. This whole program, Kelly, Eric, and Jeff, this is quite a legacy project, and I'm very, very happy to see it. And it really gives us a mapped out way for us to manage our properties, and nothing but kudos for me on the program. I'm glad to see it looks like we're prioritizing the reds and getting those up to date, and then first, which is good. I think I had a question when we were talking about this earlier in the year. There's ways to make it look like you maintain your higher ones to a higher level, or do you take care of your low ones? And I'm glad to see that we're taking care of our low ones first. No, this is fantastic. My question is, when you're saying current estimated funding needed, does that mean we're spending, we need to spend $3 million a year as far as paving, and then for the VFA, almost 11 million? Is that what that means, or is that how much money we need to squirrel away every year?
That would be spending per year.
Okay.
So if you could spend more than is allocated per year, but on average, basically, it would need to be that in 2020 dollars.
Okay, great. Well, we'll give it a shot. But yeah, definitely. Having been a park supervisor, I know the need to maintain our stuff, and you can't do it, you lose it. So very much appreciate the work and the concept and the vision. Kudos to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Rosario. I would also add to that, I so appreciate that we do have a program like this. I've seen situations at the local level and in a broader view, the state level, where, deferred maintenance over many facilities create such a huge drag on budgets because of you're just always trying to keep up and the costs go up. So I think that this is extremely smart. And I also agree that, investing this funding in public facing facilities is so important for our image as well, which is, of course, it keeps our park visitors happy. And also, it continues allowing them to say nice things about us when we do polling, and also is also really important when we go to them and ask them for more help and support. They can say, yes, my taxpayer money was invested in a smart way. So it's all really good, and I'm so happy that we have this. It's so smart, so important. I have a few specific questions, and one is, when we have paving projects on the list with the score, how do we, what's the formula for figuring out which projects get pulled off the list for attention? I mean, obviously, we probably look at the ones that need the most help first, but is there anything more specific as to how we pull projects off that list to work on them? And there's a question that goes along with that. I know that we do paving in-house, but we also, of course, probably rely on contractors outside as well. And I'm guessing our 553 funds are used both for in-house and out-of-house projects. I know that's a whole bunch of questions, but thank you. Kelly.
Kelly Barrington, Chief of Maintenance and Skilled Trades. Director Corbett, I'm going to try to work backwards from that. So we do have the ability to pave in-house, and we do. And they actually have an operating budget that, accounts for some of that. So they can purchase materials out of their regular operating budget for minor repairs, paving work that's associated with the replacement of culverts or underground utilities or anything like that. We can use the Department 553 money to give them supplies if they're doing some in-house work. We also combine contract work with in-house work. On the larger projects, however, those are mainly done by contract. They're massive. You've been on the board long enough to have approved some of those contracts, and go upwards of $1 million a piece, and we're doing several of them a year. That doesn't mean that there's still not plenty of work for in-house staff. The way these are prioritized is, at this point, is based partly on what's coming out of the database, but to assume that we go from lowest scores to highest scores all the time isn't necessarily accurate. Some of those low scores we're going to have to determine are just not going to be repaired. They're going to have to be replaced, and we may just let them sit, cordon them off for safety, and repair them when we have a larger project in that area, or can combine, for example, in Contra Costa County with Measure J funds and our own money to augment those projects and bring them along better. But the goal here is to spread things out. Our paved trails go through all the different wards in the Park District and all the different metros, and we try to spread that out as evenly and fairly as we can, while weighing that against the actual needs and the PCI scores for those individual trails and parking lots and facilities.
All right. Thank you. That's very helpful. My next question is, for our proposed budget, I don't know if there's someone on the line Jeff might be able to answer this question. Do we know what the recommendation is going to be for this part of the budget so far this year? And does it match up with the projections for what's needed?
Well, I definitely made a request in that area, but I'll turn it over to Deborah Ocker about where we're at.
Oh, hi, Deborah.
Hi, good afternoon. Deborah Ocker, the Assistant General Manager of Finance and Management Services. And I know Kelly can answer this question as well because he puts in the requests. I might have to lean on him to answer for the paving, but we do annually, we've had a performance goal to make sure we put aside $5 million into Fund 553 for these types of projects. In addition to that, Kelly mentioned that we do have some base budget that is also going in on top of that for the paving budget. Kelly, can you remind me the total paving budget if we do include the $1 million that was requested this year?
Yes, so the paving budget overall will be $5 million in total available funds, 500,000 of that a year based on distributed metro from Measure J in Contra Costa County. So as the general manager said, that's going to offset some of our costs in other places in the district. Not direct replacement, but it does help. For facilities, what we used to call major maintenance, I believe we're going to be up to $1.75 million next year, if I'm not mistaken. When I first started in the department, we were just a little over 400,000 a year in that department. So we are making headway in catching up with some of that work. For utilities and communications, we've dedicated $500,000 a year in 553 base funds. And I think we've asked for another $250,000 for bridges and piers. And most of that will be used for engineering and inspection studies so we can get a better idea of what's going to be needed for those things moving forward and on into the future.
Okay, thank you so much. And my last question, I think, would be for the GM. The mention with regard to Contra Costa County setting aside specific money for trail maintenance and Alameda County not putting trail maintenance in the measures. Are we talking about one of the past ballot measures? And what do we do? You know, is it characterized in a way that we do have a way to request some of that money, or are we just, you know, it's just not available for maintenance at all?
Thank you for that follow-up question, Director Corbett. The issue is it is in it when we all supported, I believe it was Measure B, Alameda County's transportation extension. It was very specifically that maintenance of trails qualified. And it was kind of, I would say, particularly by the bicycle groups really advocated for that. And they certainly believed the same, that it was going to be a priority. When the criteria for competitive grants came out, there was not a set aside specifically that was recommended to the board for trails or for maintenance. Whereas in Contra Costa County, we negotiated in the measure a specific set aside. So it's absolutely qualified. It's absolutely, the money is there. It's the priority from ACTIA is to build new facilities, new trails. So we just have to do more advocacy and work hard with the elected officials who frankly in some ways are competing with their own new roads and things within this. You know, maintenance isn't, as Kelly has known for years, we fought a big battle that, you know, maintenance isn't always the sexiest thing for people to get attention from citizens and from elected officials. So we were greatly disappointed. Not that we're happy it passed, we're happy it qualifies, but the criteria by the staff recommended and approved by the ACTIA board did not have a set aside. And we have met repeatedly with the staff to try to push that forward. And I think what we need to do is pull a coalition together with the bicycle groups and the park district, et cetera, to get some trail maintenance there. Because it's actually a bigger budget than Contra Costa's.
Well, that sounds good. Maybe we can start brainstorming for a strategy on that soon, or additional strategies. Sounds like you've already started down that pathway, so to speak.
Tried unsuccessfully.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, no other questions. I would just close by saying again, thank you for this smart planning. It's so nice to have those maps so we can really get a view for what's needed where across the entire district, because it is so large, and it's really helpful to the board for future planning, for budget decisions and setting priorities and knowing what we need to do going on into the future, which is always so important, thinking ahead several years, how we're going to continue to fund our beautiful parks and all of its beautiful infrastructure. So that's all I have. Anything else, Mr. Director Rosario over there?
No, I'm good. I'm happy.
Okay. All right. Thank you all very much. And Kelly, I don't know if this is your last presentation, but it was a wonderful one. And, you know, we're hoping to see you around a lot. Only if you want to.
Thank you, Director. I think I'm going to stay on because there may be questions for me in one of the other presentations today.
This like sanitary sewage management plan update, perhaps?
Yep, so I'll be with you a little while longer here.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Kelly, and everyone else. Great report and great work. All right. Our next item is sanitary sewage management plan update. This is an item for potential recommendation, and I see Matt Grawl is the presenter according. I do apologize to you if I miss who is introducing the right person. I go by this agenda. So I have Matt, and he may have somebody else he's introducing, because I do see Becky also joining us. Good morning, Matt, or good afternoon, whatever time it is.
Yeah, good afternoon, Director Corbett. Matt Grawl, District Chief of Stewardship, and Hi, Director Rosario, members of the committee today. Yeah, I'm going to be doing the introduction to the presentation and starting us off, and then Becky will do some more of the details of the presentation. So Becky Tuden, our Environmental Services Manager, is also with me today. Becky, you can start the slides. And this item is not as comprehensive or as interesting as the previous one, but it is similar in the sense that it is an example of us being proactive in presenting our information and setting up our plans so we're ready to respond if a spill does happen. So Becky, can you change
the correct slide showing?
No, it's the display settings are still wrong.
Okay, hold on. How's that?
Yeah, okay, there we're good. Okay, yeah, and so the sanitary sewer management system plans are something we've had in place for a number of years, and I will say I've been around at the district for most of the time we've been implementing these. We did start in 2006 before I was here, but we did do some updates in 2009 to these plans. Becky, we can go to the next slide. And so this is all in relation to some water board requirements that were passed in 2006. And it maybe seem a little atypical for the Park District to have one of these plans or be required to have one, but it's because the way the regulations are written, we have in several locations, we have over 1 mile of publicly owned sewer line that then discharges to a public owned treatment works. In the case of Del Val, we have more than 1 mile of transmission line that goes into our own wastewater treatment ponds that we manage. In the other cases at Anthony Chabot, Coyote Hills, and Guerin, we have over 1 mile of transmission line that then goes into another entity's public-owned treatment works. But because of the size of these systems, we're required to have these plans. So it's one of those things that's odd. You might think it's only a sanitary sewer agency, but because we have such a long length of our lines, we also have to have one of these plans. We started developing them in 2006, the Park District, after the regulations were established. Like I said, we updated them again in 2009, improved some of the information, and then the board adopted these plans in 2012. And that was a part of the regulations have changed several times, and part of the updates at one point required them to be adopted by the board. In 2013, there were some new requirements and reporting requirements established. And then last year, we had an inspection from the regional board that looked over our entire plan, and they requested us to make some updates. And so Becky's going to take over now, and we'll talk more about what those updates were, the process we went through to make some of those updates.
Good afternoon, Becky Tuden, Environmental Services Manager for Stewardship. Glad to be here. And I just want to say that in this project, I had the benefit of working with Kelly Barrington and also with Ren Bates from DECO, as well as Steve Castile and others from operations. So it was really a multi-divisional project. So as Matt was saying, this regulation applies to only 4 parks. We have plenty of lift stations and plenty of other sewer lines, but because they don't meet the threshold, they're not regulated. And then what happened in 2019 is that the water board, the regional water board, which is an arm of the state water board, came and inspected those 4 parks and found them lacking. And I think the issue is that the state and the regional board had shifted their focus from how many spills you have and being worried about spills to really wanting to see a more comprehensive management program, record keeping, documentation, as well as adequate funding for needed infrastructure upgrades. So they identified some issues that they felt the Park District should improve. One in particular was they said that we did not have an adequate ranking of our current sewer conditions and replacement needs. And that's very similar to what we just saw with the paving and the infrastructure, where we haven't gone out and actually looked at all of our underground sewer lines in a comprehensive way. They were also concerned that we didn't have an overflow emergency response plan for all of the parks. We tended to have more of a park by park response, and they wanted to see a more coordinated top-down recommendation for how we were managing spills. And they also commented that our spill documentation, our no spill reporting, that we were not meeting our deadlines. And then they wanted to see an update to our legal authority to prevent illicit discharges to sewers. Not that we are getting a lot of illicit discharge to our sewer systems, but they wanted to see that we had a specific enforcement authority. And lastly, they wanted to see that we had capital funding for any repairs that might be needed over the life of the systems. And these systems, most of them were put in the 70s. So we're coming up on 50-year-old pipes. So we worked very closely cross-divisionally after we got that report, and we put together a compliance schedule and said, okay, we're going to meet these deficiencies. And essentially, we put together a new sanitary sewer system management plan. And our compliance schedule says that we should adopt this new plan by 2020 and put into effect all of those changes. So what we've been doing over the past year, since 2019 and in this year, we've been very busy. First, to address the state concerns, we hired a consultant, Paul Causey, to do an audit of our program. And he agreed that it would be helpful to clarify the lines of response and communication and clarify responsibility. In addition, we did, DECO did initiate a sewer asset inventory and condition assessment where we looked at all of the gravity lines in those 4 parks. But because of COVID, because of red flag, because of work on the Del Val water system, because of encroachment access, we don't have those final maps and inventories yet. But essentially, when those lines were put in, we put lines on a map and we hadn't put them onto GIS. So this inventory puts them on a map and georeferences them. It actually looked, we did some cleaning, and it looks at the lines and identifies and ranks whether there are structural issues or whether there's maintenance issues. And then we also agreed that we would do the same assessment and inventory of our force mains completed by 2022. And then we also created an overflow emergency response plan. And again, our parks have always stepped up when there's been something that has needed to be corrected or when there's been emergency. But this is really about getting ahead of the curve and putting a plan in place with a specific workbook for each division as to how they would respond to this spill. So just continuing to explain what the update is. And again, it doesn't fundamentally change our program. It just clarified and I like to say general housekeeping. It was really a spring cleaning and organization. So instead of having one plan for each park, we consolidated all 4 parks into one document. And then, as I mentioned, we now have a field verification of where those sewer lines are and our assets. And then the other thing we did was we set standards for all 4 parks on when they should be cleaned. If we need to do more cleaning, we can, but we set at a minimum every 4 years, we're going to clean and we're going to track that that's being done. And in addition, we clarified that root foaming, what frequency we would use, and that will be the responsibility of the individual park. Whereas the cleaning and cammering will be run out of mast through sanitation. So just following through again on the spill response, we spent a lot of time working through a flow chart. If this, then what, if you get over 1,000 gallons, who do you call, who do you notify? We worked with dispatch and park ops, clarified how you would document a spill and who was reporting it. And then we also prepared a water quality monitoring plan so that if there is a large spill, we have protocols in place for how we want to monitor the water quality. And then there's a fiscal commitment. And again, we need to get the information from the assessment and inventory of our gravity lines and our force mains before we really know how much we need to commit. But we understand, and we just talked about this in the last item, that the district has been setting aside money for structural repairs, and this could be eligible for the Mass Utilities funds. And in talking about this with staff and potential needs, it does appear that we have sufficient funds going into the 553 that would cover what we estimate now as our potential future needs. And then lastly, we're recommending that Ordinance 38 be revised to add a new section specifically to define what an illicit discharge is and then to prohibit them throughout the district. Oh, I just forgot to mention, I don't have beautiful pictures like everyone else. I really wanted to put in sanitary sewer line pictures. So this line that we're seeing here, the blue line, is actually the one from Anthony Chabot. It was eroded in 2017 from the storm. So no spill there, but I wanted to keep it real. And this is the sewage pond that we have in Del Val, which Matt mentioned. And because we haven't been using Del Val and the water treatment system, the levels are getting low and some of the liner is potentially being exposed. So those are essentially our updates. Covers what we included in this update. Moving forward, we will continue to have an audit every 2 years. We'll be more consistent in documenting a change log if we make any changes to the plan. And then as required by the state water board waste discharge requirement, we'll be coming to you every 5 years to update and affirm that SSMP. And then for infrastructure, we're already working on looking at a design for the replacement of the Anthony Chabot sewer line. DECO is taking the lead on that. We already know that it crosses over a water body, which is not a great thing for a sewer line, and it has very few manholes, so it's difficult to maintain and clean. So we already know that's on our docket for needing replacement. And then, as I mentioned, it may be that the sewage pond, if there's some issues with the liner, that we'll need to address that in the future as well. So we're coming to the executive committee today because we just are requesting that you recommend to the full board of directors that they approve the proposed update to the sewer system management plan, and that Ordinance 38 be revised to ensure compliance with the requirements.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Those are pretty pictures.
Yes, I put them in at the end. I had to get some in there.
We'll leave the rest up to our imagination. Thank you. Thank you very much for that report. Another very helpful response to the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the work that you have done to comply with their various interests, concerns, and new regulations. They're always keeping us busy. I do know that. I have one quick question before I open it up to Director Rosario, but the new regulations in 2006 and the updates in 2013 from the Regional Control Board, the statewide requirements for the sanitary sewer systems with over 1 mile of publicly owned sewer lines discharged to a publicly owned treatment works. Does that include cities?
Yes.
Yes.
It's all entities, even federal. I mean,
so City of Oakland probably has these same requirements. And do we have any idea what their compliance plan is? I'm sort of thinking about Temescal when I talk about this. Yes, Mr. General Manager.
Yeah, just remember, Director Corbett, that the City of Oakland and other cities have already in place some legal settlements. They have an EPA order that the Water Board is a part of. That's a mandate to do so much per year. And so Oakland has been under that. And I know probably both Becky and Matt are very familiar with that because of Temescal. The issue with Temescal is the city has so many huge sewer problems with such an old city that they're working on. Temescal kind of is not the squeaky wheel, even though we have all the problems, because they have big, massive sewer projects throughout. They're actually leaking directly into the bay. But that's an existing order. That's a board order settlement that they're required to do. This is kind of on top of that. And I don't know the relationship between the two. Maybe Matt or Becky does, but they're already under an order.
Do we know if they are required to have, obviously they have many projects that they have to get to and work on as they move through them, but did the Regional Water Quality Control Board require that they put in place a plan, at least a plan, like we have a plan?
absolutely.
So they do have a plan that addresses all
Yes.
of those issues, including Temescal?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Good to know.
Because the
We were
scale is-
looking at that as part of our discussions with Oakland, but they've already been submitted and approved for this time period. I have to look and see when the next iteration is due.
Okay, good to know. And Director Rosario probably already knew that, but Director Rosario?
Now, after hearing what our issues are, I have a little more sympathy for the city of Oakland. We only have 4 miles to deal with.
a little more than that, but not much.
But yeah, the city of Oakland is, I mean, especially in the Lake Temescal Basin, they're doing engineering studies, and hopefully they'll come up with some really good solutions to
Yes.
help minimize. So both Matt and Becky are part of those talks. So we're hoping for the best. Question is, what is the definition for an illicit spill?
Okay. Do you mean within the park district or someone
Yeah, for the
tying
park
into our
district.
system?
Yeah. For us.
Okay, so it's really any sewage that leaves the system and gets out onto the ground.
Okay.
And so typically this would be, in a typical situation is someone puts something down a toilet that shouldn't be there, maybe a t-shirt or something else. And it gets stuck in the pipe, we have a clog, and then it'll overflow to manhole. That's the most typical situation. One time, the biggest spill we've ever had in the district was back in 2008, 2009. And it was at Del Val, but it was more a manufacturer's defect of a fairly recently replaced pipe. So it was a pipe that had been replaced within 10 years of the spill, and it just broke. And so that's not typical. That's, those manufacturer defects are not typical. And we have never had anything else like that. It's typically more of a clogged system that would come out of a manhole is typically what we've seen. But the other piece, with the Ordinance 38 update, that is part of, someone else discharging into our systems. It's highly unlikely that would happen. Because you think about it, where these lines are, they're within our parks, and they don't necessarily have neighbors associated with them. But it is possible that a private landowner or someone else, or even just someone with an RV, could theoretically try to tie into one of our systems somewhere. It would be highly unlikely, but it's possible. So we have to make that change. In case it does happen, we can then enforce against someone for doing that.
Okay, great.
But that happens a lot more commonly in with the sanitary sewer district, which has a much larger, lines, and those lines are very close to private property. So there is a much more of a potential for someone to tie in those situations.
That brings to mind. I know our sanitation trucks dump in a couple of different sites within the city of Oakland, at least on our site. Do we have to report that to the city? Or
No, they've gotten permission to dispose of them in those sanitary sewers.
Okay,
Yeah. So they've already gotten permission from the local entity to do that, and Kelly could give more context.
great. And then what was my other question? Oh, the documents and maps, are those available? Or where are they stored now? Are they available to the public or park staff?
Yeah.
Yes, we haven't made them available on the website until the board formally
Okay.
approves them, but they are part of the staff report that's going to the full board on the 17th.
Great. And then my last question is, once we develop these plans, is there going to be like a training at individual sites about emergency responses?
Absolutely. We haven't been able to do them yet because of COVID.
Yeah.
And the park operations was asking that we definitely want to include a lot of the seasonal workers in the training. So we've been putting off, we probably will look at putting something on in January via Summit. And then when we can get back to on the ground training, then we'll provide that.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank
and on the last question, real quick, Rosario, I want to point out that once they are adopted, the water board does require us to post them on our website. So we have the old plans are on the website, and adopted.
Yes.
We're going to update that whole plan, put the new plan, and somebody's operational emergency response plan. There's also a water quality monitoring plan after a spill, and all that will be part of the website. And when we go to the full board, we'll include that as part of the board material, that a PDF with all those files in it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well done. Infrastructure. It must be infrastructure day.
I'm just going to make a quick comment first. I just wanted to say looks like a really great, well thought out plan, and especially appreciate the work that's gone into, what to do to respond in an emergency and how to coordinate all our departments and all of that. So it looks really good. But my quick question is, you are also asking for us to approve proposed revisions to Ordinance 38. So will that language be coming back to us at some point, or?
Yeah. So
board level, or?
I'm sorry. You want to
No,
finish
go
the
ahead.
question? I thought. Okay. Yeah. No. There will be a separate. There'll be two board items coming to the board, and one will be a specific action to open Ordinance 38 and make the narrow change to give us the legal authority to enforce on anyone
Yes.
that would be tying into our system. And so there'll be two separate actions for the board, one approving the updated plans, and then the separate action will be a narrow opening of Ordinance 38 to just make this one change.
Okay, thanks. That's what I wanted to know. So we'll see the language of the change of the ordinance and look at that for potential adoption.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. General Manager.
Yes, I wanted to comment, thank you, Matt and Becky. Wanted to comment also on the two referenced infrastructure projects. First of all, the Chabot sewer line to our only other, well, we have one more coming, but one of our two existing campgrounds, very popular. That is a very significant infrastructure project, and you've talked a lot today about these ongoing costs, but that's something we probably need to start putting a fund together. I think that's going to overwhelm any of Kelly's budgeted funds for these things. It's a big capital project. I think it's going to be in the millions. But I just want to acknowledge that was the board members Rosario and Waspy advocated, saying, "Oh, I remember that sewer line. Let's really look at what it would cost before it falls in our lap, literally." And so I want to appreciate that and getting the budget in there to do that study. That study is underway. I'm not sure if it's completed or what the status is, but it is being done. The other one is just to remind everyone that the Del Val sewer ponds are a state of California asset. We operate the park, but DWR owns it, and the state built the sewer ponds. We, I believe, have replaced one liner at least once in my career. I'm not sure if we've done both, and we're up to another one, but that's also going to be very expensive. And we should be looking at some type of state grant or help. They don't usually, again, like to fund things like that for a grant, but we need to advocate. That might be a good legislative project for a legislator in a good year to maybe give us some money to do that. That's such an important and popular park in the state, and we need to advocate for that because that's going to be an expensive project. I don't know if Becky or Matt have any idea what those costs might be, but it's not going to be cheap.
Yeah. Thank you, General Manager Doyle. That's a great point to bring up. I think really right now what we're trying to do, we're trying to look at the ponds because they're just getting so much less usage. There's two ponds. The photo showed one of them, and we're only using one of the ponds. And to declare that both liners have been replaced over the last decades, so they are both fairly new. But we're having issues because now they're not being used very much. I mean, and this predates the COVID and the park closure this year. It's been a history over the last few years of just we've got more low flow showers, more low flow toilets. We've been doing all this water conservation in the park. And we've done other things to improve the operation. So we're just sending less water up to those ponds, and with evaporation and things. So we've just, there's been some, so we need to look at the operational to make sure how we're using those ponds to make sure best use it. And then they're way oversized for what they need to be. And so I think we have some concern that those liners are being exposed all the time to sunlight. And so it might be shortening the lifespan. So we just really want to do an evaluation to plan and be ready. There isn't an immediate project, but it's similar to Anthony Chabot's. We know it's going to come. We want to get an evaluation of is there anything we do immediately to prevent any issues, and what's the feasibility and scope of what will be needed to keep them going in the future. But I think so it's a good point to bring up, and as we get more of those details, we can certainly start looking at opportunities for funding.
And if I may, Ellen, just as a follow-up, so
Yes.
On a lot of the new, brand new restrooms we've done in the campground, are those pumping into that, or did we do separate tanks and we're pumping out of the tanks?
Kelly has an answer, it looks like.
If you're speaking about Del Val, all of the restrooms at Del Val that aren't vaults, that aren't standalone vaults or chemis, are within that closed system. So even the new restrooms go into that. There's
Okay.
stations there in a mile, over a mile of forced main, forced main sewage lines. So one other thing I kind of wanted to add to all of this is we're talking about capital commitments in the future. All of those lift stations at Del Valle have been replaced within the last 20 years. And Ann Shearer, my predecessor, did have the foresight to get those in the 554 program for major infrastructure or, major equipment replacement. So as those come up on their useful service life and they're being pre-funded as we go along, we'll do that with new ones too, I would hope.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. It's good to know we have friends of lift stations.
It sounds like a great saying for a T-shirt or jacket. Or something.
I bet Kelly's got some thoughts about it.
Maybe we can even get some caps. There you go. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So this item is on the agenda for recommendation to the full board for both the adoption of the SSMP plan and future small change to ordinance 38. And Director Rosario, would you like to make that motion?
I will. So moved.
So moved, seconded by me. And Secretary Fang, will you please call the roll?
Director Rosario,
Aye.
Director Corbett,
Aye. Thank you very much. It passes unanimously. And I know our next item is item 4, the 2020 Equal Employment Opportunity Workforce Diversity Report. I'm going to ask that we just have a quick 10-minute break. My apologies. Some of us have been Zooming since 11 o'clock this morning. So just a quick 10-minute break. And so what time is it now? It's 1:48. So we'll be back right at 1:58, Director Rosario.
Yes.
And
Sounds good.
apologies for the delay, but we'll see you in 10 minutes and we'll be all ready and ready to listen. Thank you. Be right back. Hello, oops. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Are we live?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for your patience for that quick break. And we are going to our next item on the agenda, which is an informational item. It's our 2020 Employment Opportunity Workforce Diversity Report. And thank you very much. The presentation will be given by Dr. Ana Alvarez and Allison Picard, our interim HR chief. So thank you very much. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Director Corbett, and good afternoon, board members, esteemed colleagues and members of the public. Deputy General Manager, Dr. Ana Alvarez, at your service. We are now moving our focus from our built infrastructure to discuss the Park District's people, what is referred to as the people infrastructure that comprises organizations, and in this case, a public institution. The item before you today, I'm so sorry.
I have one of those too.
Okay, give me like 1 second.
Yes, please go ahead. Time out.
A technical difficulty of another sort.
Yes. Working at home, we have all kinds of players in the background, kids learning, our fur babies, and and all of those things. All those who share our households with us.
The mailman came.
Yes. Your
Thank you.
dog is doing the job.
Yes. So the item before you today provides us with an opportunity to gain a shared understanding of the Park District's current workforce demographics, as well as a shared understanding of what has transpired in the reporting period pertaining to new hires, promotions, and also the people who have left the organization. The Equal Employment Opportunity Report provides us with an opportunity to regularly assess the composition of the Park District's workforce with the intent not only to understand, but to engage in discussions in evaluating efforts across the organization in achieving our goal of being a diverse and inclusive employer of choice in the Bay Area. As a public institution, we have a duty to ensure that the Park District's workforce reflects the community it serves to benefit from the richness found in the diversity of race, culture, gender, as well as diversity of thought, which is derived from our communities. Our interim Chief of Human Resources Officer, Allison Picard, and Catherine Dundee, our management analyst in the General Manager's office, will be joining me in presenting this item. And the best place to begin is really to reaffirm the Park District's commitment in diversifying our staff. The Park District continues to be committed in identifying and breaking down the barriers that hinder a representative workforce. Also, and in response to the board's resolution denouncing racism, denouncing racism and standing in solidarity with Black people and all people of color, the Department of Human Resources, DHR, has identified additional actions to meet workplace intention and voice commitment by the board directors, which we'll be presenting on today. So with that brief introduction, I would like to call Allison to join us, and she can walk us through what we found in this reporting period. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. Good afternoon, directors and staff and others joining. My name is Allison Picard. I'm the Chief Human Resource Officer on an interim basis. I am going to be presenting just some overview comments, and then Catherine is going to walk you through the data charts that are included in the narrative report you've already received. And then at the end, we're going to talk about things that are ongoing efforts, as well as things that we'll be looking to do in the upcoming months and year. So if you would proceed through the slides, Catherine. So this report is something that's required of the federal government from the EEO office, and it's for a period certain, which is a fiscal year, July 1st through June 30th. It's not the district's fiscal year, but that's the period that the federal government requires we report this information in. And it's by particular, not just gender and race, but it has other subcategories by occupation as well. And it's a prescribed format. And it's very useful because it tells you data over a period of time. The thing I like to counsel about this data is that it's not something you want to look at maybe from one year to the next, but you want to look at over a period of years looking for trends, because any one year could have anomalies, especially for a smaller employer. So this information is something that we make available first to you. We'll be sharing it with the diversity committee. They have a meeting on November 17th. We'll of course share it with the unions and post it on the website so that it's accessible to employees and the public. As Dr. Alvarez just pointed out, this reaffirms the board's commitment in the resolution that she just described, along with many policies that the district has that comply with other federal and state laws related to EEO principles of anti-discrimination, and certainly reaffirming the park's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's important to review all these activities that are mainly housed in HR, related primarily around our hiring practices. So not just the initial hire, but promotions, transfers, assignments, all kinds of things that one would want to take a look at to see, are there patterns here to make sure that we are indeed being open and inclusive. Another thing I would add here is that if we have a pattern of not promoting in a diverse way or not hiring in a diverse way, you can't beat up the hiring manager if HR is constantly giving them a list of only white males and then say that they're not hiring a diverse group of employees. So it's really incumbent on HR to have a significant outreach effort and make sure that the pool lists they get are reflective of the diversity we want to see in our hires. But it also is something we need to engage them on, especially in terms of things that are discretionary, like promotions internally. That we may want to encourage more outside hiring instead of internal only, as a way of trying to move the needle on some of the data you're about to see. And then the next item on your agenda is going to be a more in-depth discussion about the DEI process and the consultant that'll be hired to help us with these things. So in very general terms, in terms of the findings over a 10-year period, which says the window you'd want to look at, there really hasn't been too much movement. It's been very stagnant. The Park District has been historically about 70% white and predominantly male, and that does not correspond with the census data from Alameda and Contra Costa County, which is typically what you're going to want to align with in general terms. But you'll see in a couple of the subsequent slides, it's also not just about total numbers, it's about which occupational group are they in. So for example, if the target is 20% Hispanics in those two counties, and we may have an overall workforce of 20% Hispanics, but if they're all in the lowest paid categories or the lowest level positions and not executives, professionals, et cetera, then that's not really compliant with the spirit of what we're trying to do here. So you have to cut the data in several different ways to make sure we're really being effective in achieving these things, in achieving these goals. So our recent experience with new hires and upward mobility has been a little better than the predominant experience, but promotions are still primarily from white category. Departures, though, are slightly more female and non-white compared to the workforce as a whole. Those are very broad findings, and Catherine's going to walk you through some specific slides that show you those categories in more detail.
Great, thank you. This is Catherine Dudney, Management Analyst. Got our workforce demographics. So this slide that you're seeing here on the left-hand side is the 2-county census data. On the right-hand side is our workforce as a whole. And in the middle, there are 8 categories that Allison mentioned in terms of EEO categories that are kind of subsets of our workforce. Category 1, official admin, that's where most of our management classes are. Category 8 is where most of our ranger positions are, and there's a variety in between. What you'll see is the workforce as a whole is less diverse than the 2-county census, particularly in the management classes and the skilled craft classes. Where we have greater diversity is in the administrative support class. These are those same 8 categories broken out by male, female. Overall, the census is about 50-50. And you can see that in some categories we are about the 50-50, but in our protective services class, our skilled craft, and our maintenance services craft, we are about greater and male dominated, and our administrative support is female dominated. This is the intersection of race and gender. So those two graphs basically put together. Again, we've already noted that we're less race and ethnicity diverse than the 2-county census. Our female population is a little bit more diverse than our male population in terms of race and ethnicity. This is data for new hires. There were 61 new hires in this reporting period. So this is starting to look at the change in demographics. And as mentioned, our hiring is actually a little bit more 50-50 male-female, as well as more diverse, about 50% white, non-white. So we're meeting much more closer to the census on the new hires that we're bringing into the organization. Similarly, with upward mobility, there were 11 new positions. Upward mobility is defined as our seasonal and temporary staff who get promoted into a permanent regular position with the Park District. So it's a little bit different than a promotion because it's going from a seasonal or temporary position into a permanent regular position. And in these classes, again, we're pretty much 50-50 male-female, and also split by race ethnicity as well. However, when you look at promotions, so these are people that are already in permanent regular positions that are just being promoted to a higher position. We are about 80% white overall, and a lot less racially and ethnically diverse. We also need to, these are the people that are coming into the organization. Now we need to look at the people that are going out of the organization. Most of the people, there were 50 people who left the organization during this reporting period. Most of those are from retirement, but there's also a large number from that voluntarily quit the organization. These departures were pretty much 50-50 male-female as well, but keep in mind that as a workforce as a whole, we are 36% female, so a 50% leaving in female is actually reducing our overall workforce demographics of female employees. Here's that looking at race and ethnicity in addition to female, male, and what you'll see on the left two bars is our female turnover relative to the workforce, females in the workforce overall, and on the right you'll see our male turnover relative to the males in our workforce overall. And what this shows is that during our reporting period from last year, from July 2019 to June 2020, there was a slightly more non-white employees that were male left relative to the workforce as a whole, but slightly more non-white females left as compared to the workforce as a whole. Again, this is the important part of this is looking at the trend over time. It's not 1 year at a time is not enough to determine a trend. So this is the past 10 years worth of data. And as mentioned, the needle really hasn't moved very much in this time. So on the left is the 2-county census. The lines are approximately where these various classes would break out as a part of the census. And what you'll see is pretty stagnant, around 68% white throughout this time period, and a slight uptick in Hispanic and a slight downtick in Asian or Black, but we haven't done an analysis to see whether or not this is statistically significant. Workforce as a whole also.
May I ask a question on that last slide, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much, Catherine. So in order to read this slide correctly, the census data, in order to be close to the census data, the line would have to align up with these lines on the left, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
So the green line at the top, which represents white, would need to be lowered, and the blue line represents Hispanic, would need to be raised.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yes. Similarly, for male, female, the workforce is male dominated, and there's been a little up and down. The line's gotten a little bit closer together in the last 10 years, but this represents about 4%, 3 or 4% change over that time period. So yeah, that's the trend over the 10-year. And I'm going to turn it back to Ms. Picard to wrap us up.
Catherine, so in terms of next steps, there's things that are already happening and need to happen. Normalizing the conversation means talking about it with the hiring managers in the organization. So making presentations to the AGMs, to the folks out in the field who do the actual hiring, so they get familiar with this terminology, they're familiar with this data, so that they understand the why behind why HR might be asking them to take certain actions, and raise their awareness generally that this is a priority of the district. And you know, hopefully they will then be a partner with us when we're evaluating our hiring practices and making choices about whether we do internal, external recruitments, et cetera. But that spreads all the way through the process, including who's on the panels, what are the questions we ask. There's an evaluation of the entire process that needs to happen. And this consultant that you're about to hear about in the next presentation, we're hoping will help do that analysis with us and make sure we have best practices that ensure that we're having an open and equitable process. I think the district's already doing a relatively good job with outreach, but you can always do better. And particularly to the groups that are underrepresented, we're going to want to refresh that process and make sure we have community groups, sometimes churches, you know, other affinity groups can really be helpful in getting the word out about advertising for our positions to make sure that we're targeting the right population groups. The other thing we're doing is evaluating our practices and policies. We have an item just after this as well that'll be updating one of the policies related to being compliant with the law in this regard, because it's expanded the categories we need to be monitoring. We've already started a very aggressive training program. There's an implicit bias training that's been required of all the employees. Our preliminary feedback on that is that it's been very well received, but we'd like to get more formal feedback and then expand on that training. We're also looking at doing training related to the hiring process specifically. So possibly things like requiring anyone that's going to sit on a panel to go through some training related to, and there's already training built into the Summit system that the district purchased that has great modules on this for ensuring fairness, to making sure there's no implicit bias, understanding behavioral and situational interviewing, the whole awareness of all those kinds of potentially subconscious and sometimes conscious in terms of the questions that are asked and the rating tools used. That whole soup to nuts of the hiring process needs to be evaluated. And then what's been ongoing under the banner of continuing here is HR staff also need to be trained to make sure that the announcements going out remove any form of, you know, any barriers, anything that might be perceived as something that would discourage an applicant of color or a woman from applying in the way a job's described. We use already something called pass point analysis, which is a common technique in most hiring agencies, where you establish when you're doing a test what the cutoff is for pass. And there's a statistical analysis you can do in terms of where you draw that line. And you can evaluate by looking at the ethnic and gender composition. Are we drawing the line too high? If we dropped it just a little bit lower, can we move up candidates that may otherwise not have been considered? And there's a whole statistical process around that practice that we're already doing and we would continue to do. And then, as I mentioned, we have ongoing sexual harassment and implicit bias training that we'd like to continue and expand on. And all of those efforts I'm hoping will improve the situation. But I'm most excited about this consultant you're about to hear about, because that is a huge commitment of the agency in terms of giving us resources to do this analysis and give us the tools we need to be able to make the changes that I think you'll want to do to see that we can ensure the workforce is more diverse in the future. So I think that's the length of our presentation. If you had any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Allison and Catherine and Dr. Alvarez. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful report, and it's really important to have these numbers. So before I say anything else, I'll ask Director Rosario if he has any questions or comments he would like to bring forward.
Thank you. I really appreciate this report. I just have, I know there's a lot of work into it, and this is our mirror that we're looking into to examine ourselves. And one question is, I'm concerned about how many people have left the Park District voluntarily. Did we do exit interviews with any of those folks to find out if there's any specific reasons that might be related to being uncomfortable or harassment or whatever? Is that done?
Dr. Alvarez, you want to answer that, please?
Yes, thank you, Allison. Yes, since 2016 and 2017, we began collecting exit interviews specifically to understand this 10-year trend. I don't have, I haven't reviewed them myself to be able to speak to them, but this is something that we will be discussing with the consultant to be able to understand what may be causing the exodus of females of color from the Park District. And it may be a combination of that we're employing a much younger workforce where they have different values. The millennials are looking for something very different. Or it may be something else, but we really can't speak to it until we understand and we interview them again through the consultant, which we're planning to do. Because as they're exiting and they've been out away from the district maybe a year, 2 years, we would like to understand what their experience was here at the Park District. So you'll be hearing more on that.
Okay, great. And I'm also, I'm encouraged by our recent hirings, the diversity in our recent hirings, so that bodes well. And as, yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing what the consultant has to say. Because, I mean, being with the Park District so long, I've seen this trend happening for many, many years. And I think one of, I mean, having been a product of being hired because of a consent decree back in the 1970s that required the Park District to hire minorities and women back in the 1970s. I mean, I was a product of that. And then after Proposition 209 passed, then we saw a major decline, started to see a major decline in the hiring of our of minorities and women too. And so that has always been concern to me, and it continues to be a concern to me. And I'm really happy that we're looking in the mirror and looking to address our practices. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Rosario. I have a few questions, and one is along, well, I guess this is more of a comment, along the same lines of what Dee raised. It'll be really important and interesting to see what the consultant shares with us in looking at the data we have and the trends that we have. And I'm also concerned about the early departure dates of female and people of color. I think that is an important number to take a look at. And, you know, it might be part of a larger trend throughout the area, but it's very important for us to take a look at that and see why that's happening here at the Park District as well. So I appreciate that. And on the EEO report, is this something that I know it's required, as Allison said? Is this when was the last time a report like this was given to the board? Because I'm sorry, I don't remember. I don't remember when previously. It may be because I wasn't on the executive committee, but is this every couple years, or how often is this required to be brought before the board?
This report is required to be brought forward to the board executive committee on an annual basis. and we file it on an annual basis. We did skip 1 year from recollection due to circumstances, difficult circumstances. But the report, while it may not have come to the board, we have had very good conversations at the Joint Labor Management Committee of the Workforce Diversity Committee with ASME Local 2428. So that's another place where we discuss this report.
Yes, and I just want to comment on that further because you've just now given the report to not only the executive committee, but the Workforce Diversity Committee, D&I. And so I think that the rest of the board would be very interested in hearing and seeing this report as well. So I would hope that this can be shared more broadly with the full board, because I do think they would want to see these numbers, and especially as we embark upon some initiatives that the board did ask for us to move forward on in the passings of our resolution earlier this year. So I just think that it would be great to share this with the full board, and I do think that they would be very interested. And then this question is sort of outside of this report, but I'm hoping we can get a report soon on how the implicit bias training is being received by those that are taking it, and maybe some numbers on how many people have taken it so far, and all of that. I've heard some very good remarks too, very unofficial remarks, but people seem to be appreciating the implicit bias training. I'd like to hear more about that. And other than that, it's always important to have this information available to us so we can take a look at it, see what it means for us, and, see what it means for our, all of our goals and our mission here at the Park District. And thank you for putting it together for us. It's always good to have data to be able to then determine whether we're being proactive as we should be on important issues. Yes, Mr. Jim.
Thank you very much. I agree with all these comments. It's a very important issue for the district. I have asked questions several times about what I consider an extremely new trend of people leaving the district early in the career. And I've asked Dr. Alvarez and HR to look into that. As she mentioned, we do exit interviews. And are these people having another opportunity at a promotion somewhere else faster? Are they moving out of state? We're getting an increase of people moving out of state. So it would really be good to know if they're dissatisfied with the job or the job environment, or is there another reason? And I think that is a very important question you've asked, Director Corbett. Secondly, I do also think it would be good to have a comparison of like agencies, like we do on many things. Where are we in the realm of park agencies at making progress? I know in working with the National Park Service, this was a very high priority. The last director, Director Jarvis in the National Park Service, which had a very bad numbers as far as promotions. In fact, it was even during my tenure at GM, I think they had some of the first high-level promotions for women in the National Park Service. So I do think it'd be good to be able to compare what other agencies, even out of state, national parks, state parks, or county parks, what progress they're making and what they're doing, because this is a goal of everyone. I'm extremely satisfied with the diversity of people using the parks. We are actually doing much, much better than state parks and other agencies. But are we representing and reflecting that diversity in our workforce at all levels? And I think that's what we're trying to get at. And I want to thank everybody who's working hard on this.
Thank you very much, Mr. GM, and very much appreciate those comments as well. Yeah, it's very, very, very important. And let's see, I don't know. Oh, I do have another question. Does the EEO report require statistics with regard to LGBTQ employees at all, or is it all just gender and race?
Not at this time. No, it's only the categories of race and gender.
Have we ever kept data on this issue?
Not that I'm aware of. Most agencies, it would be difficult to request it. At what point do you request that information? It's not something you can put on an application because it could be perceived as a basis to discriminate.
Yes, absolutely. And I know that there's some very serious privacy issues as well. But I was just wondering if we track such numbers, because I think that's extremely important too. If we are going to reflect the diversity of our communities, it's important that we also embrace our LGBTQ community members as well and employees. So thank you very much for that. Okay, any other questions or comments? And so I really would like to see this presented to the full board. So is that something we can do?
We certainly can do that, Director Corbett. We frequently will have an HR update, which will give several reports. And I do believe we've done the diversity report to the full board that way. But any way you want, we can get that as soon as we're ready to move forward. We'll be happy to do that. This is obviously a district-wide priority.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure people will welcome it. So appreciate that very much. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Yes, no? Okay. Thank you all for that great report. I know that took a lot of number crunching and data review. And Catherine, thank you for your amazing slides as well. Our next item is item 5, which is update on the Park District's implementation of resolution number 2020-06132, denouncing racism, and a recommendation of a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant to conduct an internal assessment. And this is Dr. Alvarez and Catherine Dudney.
Yes, thank you so much, Director Corbett, Deputy General Manager, Dr. Ana Alvarez. I'm excited to shepherd this item for your consideration on behalf of many staff members who have contributed to this endeavor, and look forward to continuing the conversation on creating a Park District culture of belonging where all of our people, including people of color, can thrive. Next slide, Catherine. Can you put up the slides, Catherine? So let's see. Okay, next slide.
Nice picture.
Yes, thank you. Catherine Dudney will be joining me in presenting this item, and we will be providing some background, an update on the board's resolution on denouncing racism, and sharing with you the good work that will allow us to engage in a diversity, equity, and inclusion organizational assessment to develop a strategic plan. Next slide. As a way of background, the Park District strives to follow EEO guidelines and have policies in place that speak to, policies that speak to, for instance, the prohibition of harassment and discrimination and retaliation. We also, if you recall, the Park District in 2019 created a transgender employment policy in partnership with ASME Local 2428. We have in place policies pertaining to nepotism, and also the ability, following regulations and the law, the ability for our working moms to be able to lactate in the workplace. In addition to that, the Park District has benefited from our partnership with ASME Local 2428 after the consent decree that Director Rosario mentioned at the last item, where through a joint labor management committee, we talk about issues that pertain to employment conditions and recruitments and hirings and retentions of a diverse workforce. And certainly, as we have referenced in the last presentation, the Park District has engaged in extending implicit bias, which comes out of an outcome of a robust process throughout the organization, and the pilot that was done to understand a customized curriculum that can speak to the Park District's needs. And I appreciate both Director Corbett and Director Rosario participating in the pilot to launch that training. And certainly we continue to extend sexual harassment with an additional hour for transgender, how to support transgender employees in the Park District. Next slide. So as a way of background, in June of this year, the Board of Directors was very specific in expressing through policy direction their commitment to denouncing racism. And specifically, the resolution pulls out language that commits the organization, our employees, and it also encourages a culture where Black employees and other people of color can realize their full potential. We also commit that our entire public service workforce will embrace a culture of belonging in an inclusive organization, and that our workforce in all levels of the organization will reflect the communities that we serve. Next slide. Here's a different way of looking at the slide that you just saw in terms of the Equal Employment Opportunity Report findings. And in essence, what this is telling you is that overall our workforce is 68% white and 32% non-white. And the graphs on the right show that while we are making progress to diversify our workforce through hiring and upward mobility, our overall workforce and our management staff in particularly are still less racially diverse than the two county areas and the 33 cities that serve as the Park District's jurisdiction. Next slide. So I wanted to take a moment to give you an update since June, when the board made its commitment to denounce racism. There's a couple of things that have happened here. We, immediately upon passing of the resolution, we informed the employees of the board's resolution and commitments through different staff meetings and had very good conversations to normalize the conversation and to understand what is the right terminology and what are some of the, what is the intent behind the board's policy direction. We also, as you saw today, we have restructured the EEO report. We are now, while in the past, we will report to the board and we will discuss these issues at the Workforce Diversity Committee, it pretty much remained there. And now we're saying we're going to communicate the EEO report and the role and the commitment of the Department of Human Resources, DHR, in being able to meet this primary goal to diversify our workforce. And what does that mean? And we're also making we restructure the report so it's more transparent in how we communicate the findings. And we've added visual elements and new charts so that it could be a little bit more friendly for the, and that can speak to all audiences. And one new feature of the report that you saw here is that now we're including in our EEO report immediate action steps that the Park District can take in being able to address some of the findings and some of the trends that we're seeing over time, including identifying opportunities for how to continue improving the report. So for that, I will have to share with you that as we looked into the data, we will be relying on a consultant to say, traditionally, the Park District has benchmarked against the general population demographics, where other agencies are actually benchmarking against the people who can work. So that means people over the age of 16. And we haven't done that here. And I have an intuition that perhaps if we benchmark consistently with other public agencies, our numbers might be looking a little bit better and maybe a little bit different. And then also there's the training opportunity. We embrace a culture of learning. And while we have spoken about the implicit bias, we also would like to, and we have also extended the transgender training for all the supervisors and managers as part of sexual harassment. Next slide. And since the resolution passed, we've developed a two-pronged strategy in how to address the commitments and the policy direction that is called out by the resolution. And we've determined in following best practices to do a two-step process. When we look at the organization internally, which what you're going to hear about today. And then the second phase is about understanding the community impact that the Park District is having primarily in marginalized communities as we extend public services. So this is about the level of services that we're extending and where we're making our public investments in terms of adding amenities and how we are structuring our fees pertaining to public access to public lands through an equity lens. And that's another different, very large body of work that we're looking at embarking in 2021. We have placed a request with the support of the general manager for the 2021 budget that would do this type of work. And in the mid-year budget process for this year, and we were able to, again, identify funding to do the first phase or the first assessment to look at the organization internally, really focusing on the people infrastructure of the Park District, our workforce. And we have, in addition to that, advanced the diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant selection process by creating a team, soliciting the contributions and the volunteer participation of employees throughout the organization that would like to continue the conversation and have some expertise in this area that they bring from outside, from other resources that they had. And we went ahead and we reviewed the firms, and we have a recommendation for you today. So it's quite a bit of very meaningful body of work that has happened since the passing of the resolution. Next slide. In addition to this, we, as we started thinking about, so how do you even begin to approach this body of work? And it really comes down to understanding not only best practices, which we did. We took the time to understand and follow the guidelines by the National Recreational Parks Association. We have a very good partnership with Metro Parks, and we had an opportunity to meet with them, discuss lessons learned from their experience. They're 4 or 5 years ahead of us in that regard. My colleagues across the bay, my dear colleagues in San Francisco Rec and Park, we embarked in this body of work since 2016. So I was able to check and see how far they've been able to accomplish. And I'm very, very moved by all the work that has been done there. Also, we looked at the County of Marine, Portland Parks and Recreation, the City of Seattle, certainly, who leads the most public agencies in this body of work. Minneapolis Parks and Recreation are also very dear colleagues that have shared their work with us in terms of all that they've done to understand through an equity lens, not only the impact that we're having in extending public services, but how we manage internally our public organizations. East Bay Mud and Elk Grove were additional entities that we looked at. And then I'd like to turn it over to Catherine, but as you listen to her, to the process and to her presentation, the best thing that I can tell you is that we're reflecting and we're evolving. So we're taking the steps to better understand how unconscious bias surfaces in our work, and we're defining how we must change going forward. So with this guidance of experts, we are hopeful to develop a multi-year plan that will help us to better include the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in determining how we work and who we work with. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Catherine.
Great, thank you, Dr. Alvarez. Catherine Dudney, Management Analyst. I'm going to talk you through our DEI RFP process and our recommendation that we have going forward. First, to start off with, this was a team effort. We had a number of folks involved in both the development of the RFP as well as in reviewing the proposals and the interview process and making the recommendation. In addition to Dr. Alvarez and I want to acknowledge Officer John Bottom from the Police Association, Lisa Gorgian, Chief of Design and Construction, who has this experience from her work at Oregon Metro, and Alice Kenner, our training manager, who also has done some of this work at her previous employer. Daryl Look, our new senior HR analyst overseeing recruitment, who's a key player in the outcomes of the work. Chris Newey, a representative from ASME and a park supervisor, and then Kip Walsh, our former chief human resources officer before she left, all important components of the team. So in terms of the scope, as Dr. Alvarez mentioned, we're looking at a two-pronged approach. The first part for this RFP is internally focused, and there's two scopes of work, 2 tasks really, an organizational assessment that then leads into a strategic plan. And so these are some of the items that the organizational assessment will address, such as our leadership and our staffing, our hiring and recruitment processes, our EEO reporting and investigations, professional development and training, and then also really getting an idea of the Park District's culture and the experience of being an employee and working here. And that's really important, and I think it'll shed some light into some of the questions that you've had earlier today about trends and why people might be departing. The second task is to develop a strategic plan from that information. So we analyze ourselves and see where we are in these items. And then we develop goals, objectives, strategies, and outcomes that are really measurable and have concrete action steps that we can review on an annual basis or look at on a regular basis to make sure that we're achieving our goals. So that's really important. In terms of the timeline, you offered we had the resolution in June, the funding was approved in July, and we got right to work on the RFP. Again, we had a number of people from the team provide input into that process, and we issued the RFP on our website on the 4th of September. We sent this RFP to about 41 different firms that were recommended to us through various connections or people that we had found through internet searches. Some of the folks that we reached out to said that they were too busy to do the work, but recommended additional firms. So we continue to expand our outreach. The RFP was posted for 6 weeks. Proposals were due on the 16th. We then conducted interviews with the top 3 firms, and we're here today to provide our recommendation. And we hope that the recommendation goes to the full board to authorize initiation of the contract negotiations at the next board meeting the board meeting on the 17th. From those folks we sent the RFP to, we ended up with 6 very good proposals. They came from a wide range of firms. The costs were between $68,000 and $113,000. We did put the $100,000 dollar amount in the RFP, so people were targeting around that amount. The firms ranged in size and expertise, but it was a really good mix, and we were pleased with the response that we received. Just wanted to note briefly that in our RFP, we did list out the scoring criteria for both the proposal and the interview, and that's what we used, so all the firms knew what to expect. And we had a standardized process. We had 6 people on the team review all of the proposals and rank the firms 1 to 6, and then we met to agree on the top 3 firms to interview. These were the top 3 firms that we ended up interviewing: Dahlberg Advisors, BCT Partners, and Rami and Associates. Again, very different firms, kind of looking across. Dahlberg is a global firm with a regional presence. BCT Partners is a national diversity firm that consults regionally, and Rami is a locally based regional planning firm. They had a variety of services. BCT Partners really focused on diversity work, and then we pulled out one highlight from each of these 3 firms. Dahlberg really focusing on the relationship and collaboration aspect, BCT focusing on a proven framework in their data analytics, and Rami really focusing on their local public sector experience. I did want to say a couple of questions that we asked all the firms to prepare answers to, and that included their experience working with labor unions specifically, and also working with police. And we asked about their successful implementation of projects, because we wanted to make sure that they had experience not just planning, but actually seeing things through and making sure that their plans were successful. And we asked standard questions about how they would communicate with our team and how they would keep their projects on budget and schedule. So following the ranking, the team came up with the recommendation of BCT Partners that we're going to present to you today. We were very impressed with their interview. They ranked first with 5 of the 6 members that reviewed them in the interview process, and second with the 6th member. So there was pretty strong consensus for them. They are acknowledged by HR manage HR as a top 10 D&I diversity and inclusion company. And so they're really well qualified in this work. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this firm for you, because I'm sure you'll want to know more about them. So again, this is really their mission. So their mission at the organization is to provide insights about diverse people that lead to equity. This is really the core of their business and what they do. They had a very robust team of about 10 members with excellent qualifications. I'm highlighting here some of the key team members that we would expect to interface with the most. Dr. Pinkert, Ms. Bird, and Mr. Hunt, on the three on the left, are the ones that participated in the interview with us. And calling out a few things from their resumes that you might be interested in. Ms. Bird had specific experience working with the Sheriff's Office on a mentoring and succession program specifically for Black police officers. Mr. Hunt had experience as a former labor law and civil rights attorney with specific expertise in equal employment office regulations, Opportunity Commission regulations. And Mr. York's experience in data analytics and data science and modeling that specifically led to recommendations. We were really impressed by all of them. We also asked all of the firms to give us specific examples of work they had done in the public sector and in the Bay Area. BCT had an exhaustive list, and I just pulled out a few that were relevant here. You can see they have had some experience with parks and recreation. They have had extensive public sector experience, particularly at the federal level with the Department of State, as well as the Department of Labor and the Department of Justice, as well as a number of cities and counties. And then in the Bay Area, they've worked with large corporations as well as some small, locally based, Oakland-based nonprofits. So really wide range of clients. Here's their timeline for what they've proposed. So they broke the two pieces down into a 1-year timeline for the organizational assessment and a 6-month timeline for the strategic plan. They'd start by reviewing our data, and then they would implement an employee-wide survey to assess our culture and climate. They would examine our organizational policies and practices and conduct a series of interviews and focus groups. One of the things we liked about their proposal is they specified that they would individually interview at least 10 people from the Park District's management and 10 people from the Park District staff, as well as having 10 focus groups of 25 people as a rough estimate to reach approximately 30% of the Park District's total staff directly through interviews and focus groups. That's in addition to the employee survey. And then they would analyze that data and deliver the final report. One other item on the interview, we did specifically ask for interviews with both current and former employees. So this is a way to get at some of the questions that we talked about earlier. Another way to look at their work, their organizational assessment piece, I wanted to highlight here that one of the things that they had that we really liked was this GDBI that's listed in that little green circle. That stands for the Global Diversity Index Global Diversity and Inclusion Benchmark. It was established by 95 experts in the field, and it benchmarks a number of metrics on 5 levels. So 1 being at least advanced and 5 being the most advanced. And the reason that this is important is it really lets them tailor the strategy to where the organization is at. So for example, if we come in at a level 2 on a metric, we can focus on trying to get to level 3 without jumping to level 5. And they have strategies for how to move and advance between each one of these levels that is a proven framework that they've used and know that it works. Their strategic plan would take place over a 6-month timeline. So once we get the assessment done and they know what areas we need to strengthen, that's when we would get a team from throughout the district together to work on the strategic plan collaboratively over a 6-month process with them, where they'd work on refining the strategy and then finalizing the plan into, again, like I said, concrete, actionable items that we can then implement and measure. One last thing we ask all of the consultants to share with us is lessons learned from previous projects. Again, we wanted to make sure that these were going to be implementable and that they could share with us their best practices. And I thought that these were really worth sharing with you all. Their first was a good assessment leads to a good plan, leads to a good assessment, and so forth. They really acknowledge that this is ongoing work, and we'll make an assessment and we'll have a good plan, we'll implement some of those, and then we'll need to assess again. And it's an ongoing process of continual improvement. The second was that a good process leads to buy-in and alignment. They acknowledge that the process is only going to be successful if we have the buy-in from the district and all of our staff and the leadership as well. Step walk run, this is right sizing the DEI strategy to the maturity and capacity of the organization. So again, this gets to the different levels and making sure that we're setting up a strategy for success, that we are not trying to jump ahead too fast and misstepping and not being able to meet our goals. And then their fourth one, which they really stressed, was leadership matters. Some agencies do this as a check the box item, and those plans don't end up being successful in the long term. If you really want this to make a difference, you need to have commitment and buy-in at all levels of your organization, particularly with your leadership, and that starts with the board. And so you're a very important part of that, and we're thinking about how the best way to engage you in this process is. We know that you will want to be engaged and really want to make sure that there's opportunity for that. So we'll be working with the consultant on their recommendations and also working with you on how to make sure that your presence is visible, because it really matters. So our recommendation is that the Park District to enter into negotiations to contract with BCT partners to conduct the internal organizational assessment and to develop a strategic plan focused on advancing a vision of a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce of excellence. And with that, I will take any questions. I will make one comment before we move on to questions. Just on the last presentation, I wanted to acknowledge that the data crunching on all that EEO stuff, that was really all of the folks in the HR department. Tracy DeAngelis in particular has been working on that, as well as Lupe, and I know some other folks were involved. I'm not sure who, but just wanted to acknowledge them for their hard work. And now we'll take questions.
Ellen, you're muted.
Yes, I noticed. Thank you very much, Catherine. Director Rosario, would you like to ask any questions?
It looks and sounds to me like you've done your due diligence, and I'm really looking forward to this getting on the ground. My only question is, once we hire the consultant, is there a contingency plan for have them to return to reassess, like a year from now, or what, or in sometime in the future to revisit to make sure that we're on track?
Yes, thank you, Director Rosario. I think the biggest takeaway in understanding the different approaches to do this type of work is it's a continuum. So we constantly have to be working. It's not a destination, but rather a process. And once we have more information in our original assessment, and we have a better understanding of what are the things that we need, where the opportunities may lie for growth, and the opportunities where may lie pertaining to realignment, then we will be able to make a determination of what would be the best way to continue assessing. And so we're leaning into the consulting firm to be able to provide us with that. And we're going to have very good conversations with them throughout the entire process. And again, it really depends on what we may find. Again, we don't know what may be causing some of these issues. We don't know what perhaps what the experiences that people are having per se, but we're looking. We're very committed to reflecting and understanding, so that we can evolve to a culture of belonging.
Yeah, I really really like the piece where they're going to talk with people on the ground, and not only currently working but past employees as well. So I am hugely in favor of this this recommendation. So thank you very much for all the work, and I'm looking forward to it starting.
Thank you very much, Director Rosario. I agree with my colleague. This is, it looks like you've done an excellent job of reviewing candidates and coming up with a great recommendation for us to move forward. My one overall question, and I think this takes place in the process, once you've hired and you have the groups that are being interviewed, I mean, I know our general overall goal with this, but what do we have some specific goals that we have as targets for this report?
Yes, I'm looking at Catherine, but yes, we do. So our specific goals or our overarching framework, it really starts with the board's resolution. So that's really what we made some public commitments. We've received the policy direction, and that's our starting point. And then from there, we hope to develop principles. We do the assessment, and then we'll have a very specific idea of what are the specific objectives to be able to get to an organization where people of color can thrive, an organization that truly reflects the communities that we're serving across 33 cities. So those are the large goals in mind, but it will get better and better refined as we start understanding where we are. And that's why that framework that BCT is putting forward together it's a very critical tool and resource to be able to understand how we can better get to the place that we need to. And it doesn't have to be running to it either, because that will not be effective, and it will certainly not be successful. That's the best piece out of BCT, is that they're pacing our growth, and they're pacing the strategies based on organizational capacity. And we want to bring everyone. We want to normalize the conversations, and we want to do this with being very humble and being able to also be grateful in the place in which we work, the people that we work with, and the privilege and power that some of us may have.
Thank you very much. Could we go back to, I don't know how many slides back it's, Catherine, but maybe 2 slides. It's the one where it talks about it's like the timeline of the different groups that are meeting and discussing. And
Sure. Okay.
yeah, that's it.
Was it this one? Okay, yeah. So this is on strategy.
So will board members be involved in this, or will it all be staff?
As
right?
Yes, no, we want to involve everyone in the organization, and that includes elected officials. And we're having a conversation. We will be having a conversation with a consultant based on their experience in other public entities. Where does the greatest opportunity lie for the most impactful experience for the elected official? And we're hoping to learn from them and to listen to them. And it may be that the elected officials, because you are not only leading the organization through policy and governance, but you're setting the policy in terms of the buy-in, the public investment, and the impact that we're having for this body of work. So your involvement may be at different stages of this process.
Okay, thank you very much. And I do think it's important to involve the board, but I would also want to make sure, I know there's limited space for people in the discussion groups, and I wouldn't want the board to crowd out employees as well. So whatever that balance is important. Okay, that's the only question I have, and thank you so much for this recommendation today, and thank you very much for bringing it forward as a reaction and an action plan to the request that was made of the board in the passing of the resolution. And I think this is going to be a very important process for us at the Park District as we continue to, fulfill our mission and to our communities, and including our employees in that as well. So thank you all very much. Anything else, Director Rosario?
I make the motion to approve to award the contract to enter into contract negotiations with BCT partners.
Sounds great. I will second that motion. And if we can ask the secretary to please call the roll.
Director Rosario,
Aye.
Director Corbett,
Aye. Unanimous, passes. Thank you all very much. I know that was substantial work and we appreciate it, especially since it's all being done remotely. We forget, we've gotten so used to doing this all on screen, but it is extra work and effort, and we sincerely appreciate it. So, all right, thank you all. The next item and last item is item number 6, update to personnel administrative manual, protected class and citizenship language. And I see that that's being presented by Dr. Ana Alvarez and Allison Picard, and I'm guessing Catherine Dudney as well, because I still see her with us. So please proceed.
Thank you so much, Director Corbett. Allison had to jump into another meeting, but I'm going to lean into our District Council, Carol Victor, to make sure that I don't misstep in shepherding this piece. But again, in response to the board's resolution, we were looking very carefully as to where are those opportunities where we can signal the most publicly and internally. And we have an amazing team of executives that includes Carol Victor, Deborah Acker, and then it was also Kip Walsh. We made a commitment to think about revamping the personnel administrative manual. And this was our big goal for 2020. We have been suffering through it for the last 4 years. And COVID, the pandemic came and it upended our goals. But as we understood how critical, even more than ever, is to address issues of race, protected classes, and how do we signal, we collectively decided that the minimum that we can do is to do those changes to the PAM in Section 17 that speak to protected classes and also the ability to work here in the Park District. So Catherine, do you mind putting up the slide? So in Chapter 17.01, it speaks to administrative processes. And under hiring, we're actually updating the anti-discrimination language by bringing it up to par with what we're legally required to follow. So what we're doing is updating the language from FIHA, and we did add that, let's see, that the Park District prohibits discrimination of any other basis protected by law. So if the law continues to change, we're very much, the personnel manual will continue to be relevant. The other change in the language speaks to the eligibility to work. The former language spoke to that once an employment offer was made to an individual, they had about 3 weeks, I believe, to show proof that they've applied to be a citizen of the United States. And actually, the law says that all persons employed by the Park District are required to comply with the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1996 by presenting documents that verify identification and authorization to work in the United States. So you don't have to be a citizen to work for the East Bay Regional Park District. And we have been in compliance with the Immigration Reform Act and Control Act of 1986. We just needed to update our language. And it's really important that our policies reflect not only the what's legally required, but it signals correctly to people, and that was very important to us. In as we signal and as we continue to work with our staff and our recruitments, I should say. So those are the only proposed changes for the PM at this time. We're hoping that more work, definitely more work will come out of the consultants' work in 2021.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I always stumble over this. Chief Counsel, General Counsel, Carol Victor.
Thank you, President.
The attorney.
Any title works for me. Carol Victor, District Counsel. I just wanted to point out on that language where it refers to political or union activity. That's not actually in FEHA. It's in the Unruh Civil Rights Act. But our policy has always combined both the FEHA anti-discrimination policies and those provisions in one single statement.
Thank you very much. I was just going to comment, appreciate you pulling this page out of the manual and dusting it off a little because I did see some very old language that I haven't seen in a while. So thank you very much. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I know we're so busy doing so many other things, great things here in the Park District, that every once in a while we need to go back and look at our manuals and plans and get them updated. But we're always busy doing something. So I'm not worried about that. So thank you so much. Director Rosario, do you have any questions? I think that this is fairly self-explanatory and straight up for a motion to onto the board.
Yeah, my only comment is that we had a carpenter who turned into a master supervisor, Sharon Corkin. She was a citizen of New Zealand. So we have that history. But I move the staff recommendation to modify the language in 1701.
I'll second that. Please call the roll.
Director Rosario?
Aye.
Director Corbett?
Aye. That's unanimous and passes. Thank you all very much. A lot of amazing, wonderful work shared with all of us today and all of these amazing reports. And again, we can tell that the Park District is working hard and is very busy and never runs out of something to do. This represents tons and tons of work in these reports today. So thank you so much. I see the general manager. Do you have some comments you would like to make before we go to public comments? Oops, muted.
Oh, now he's.
Here I am.
You're unmuted, but we can't see you. There you are.
Back again. Well, that was a pleasure. Just wanted to thank staff for all the great work on this. This is a very important issue for the future and current and future of the district. And it does involve a lot of work and really bringing us up to date and following the board's resolution, taking us a little while to get all the act together, but we're moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Manager, and we very much appreciate your support of our work on this as well. Thank you so much. Okay, Secretary Fang, do we have any public comments?
We have no public comments.
All right, thank you very much. Then we move to board comments, I think is next. Board comments. That's you, Mr. Rosario.
Thank you. I just want to second your comments that on the work of the staff. It's this is a huge body of work. I appreciate everyone's diligence in putting this together, and like I said before, I'm looking forward to moving on and seeing the fruits of this labor.
Thank you very much, Director Rosario. Yes. This was an agenda of great depth, and we appreciate it. All right, I really don't have anything else either in my public comments. But our next item is general manager comments. Mr. General Manager.
No comments, very busy, very serious agenda. I really appreciate the board plowing through it and paying so much attention to these important topics. They were pretty dense, and I mean that in standpoint of just all the way from the really important maintenance work that we're doing. I think this was a great last meeting for Kelly as far as that presentation. We have come so far on our maintenance of our parks compared to a lot of other agencies, including state parks that I've seen, and appreciate the board pursuing that. And then looking also at our efforts for diversity and inclusion. I think it's very important. Equally balanced on heavy issues, but very important. So I'm very pleased to get these to you and move forward.
Yes, very important, representing multi-year projects, looking into the future, and it will all bode us well for the future of our wonderful district that we all love. All right, with that, if there's no other comments by anyone, the meeting's adjourned. Nice to see you all. Take care, be well, and hope for good luck in the news pronunciation.